Okay, so Yakuza 0. I played it, finished it, and I don't know. The game, I shouldn't say, I don't know. I'm just kind of collecting my thoughts. But the game as a whole was a good game, you know. It just failed to grasp me the same way that the first time I played Assassin's Creed did, or um, GTA San Andreas did the first time that I played it. FYI, I played my first AC game relatively recent compared to when the series actually started. Same thing to San Andreas, but that's beside the point. It's just the story. I was expecting the story to do more for me. You know, I was expecting the story to kind of, you know, almost like a good book to where you get, you know, you start reading and you can't put the book down. You know, Yakuza 0. You know, I like the setting. I like what the story is about. I actually bought basically Yakuza 0 to I think it's like Yakuza 6 or something like that. Some series deal that they had on the PlayStation store because I saw the Yakuza like a pirate game come out, you know, and it's in chronological order one, two, three, so on and so forth. So I was like, you know what, this seems like one of those games where you get more out of it if you play in order. Now there's some disagreement to whether Kawakami, Kawami, however you pronounce it, or you know what order that comes with Yakuza 2 and all that stuff. But um, aside from the story, I'll get back to that. Aside from the story, the gameplay, at least for me, was pretty good from what I understand. Like it was kind of like a remake from the original Yakuza, first Yakuza, and so is Kawami. I forget if that was supposed to be a remake from the second Yakuza or the first one, but the gameplay was pretty good. I know that if it is, you know, with it being a remake or a remaster, the controls had to be updated from the PS2 version or what have you. The gameplay was pretty good. It isn't as open world as I initially thought, but that's kind of to be expected from a game that was originally made in the PS2 era or PS3 era. Um, One thing that I mean, when I was playing, or after a while of playing, like it got kind of annoying after a while, but you can appreciate it, especially with the way the system is, as far as you know, making money to get to improve your abilities and all that stuff. Was that the random gangs and the random group of you know guys and all that stuff? Sometimes the street gangs, sometimes the yakuza gangs, sometimes they're just randos, you know, doing whatever, and other times guys are beating up, you know, civilians like on the street. So I could appreciate that, and it was interesting when I first started the game, the story and all that stuff. But as time went on, it got kind of you know monotonous, you know, to a point where instead of running towards or looking forward to face whatever gang was you know ready to challenge me, it got to a point where I think for me it was like a little bit before halfway through the story, I would actively run away from the street gangs or the yakuza gangs or the whoever's. Um, but it did get monotonous. I think, well, for me, what kept me kind of, you know, when I didn't run away and when I was motivated to attack is because I wanted to make some more money, get some more experience. And they were never too hard. You know, once you found an ability or a skill set that you liked, and more specifically, not just what you liked, but you know, was efficient at mowing down enemies, it became a little bit more bearable. A lot of the side quests or side missions I kind of avoided. For me, anyway, they didn't seem overly interesting. Um, there was one side quest that got me kind of confused. I think it was one where I had to gain entry to like this nightclub, this fight club, basically. And I forget exactly what the scenario was, but basically I had to go and do another task to gain entry into that fight club. And the reason why that fight club had hooked me because you know Yakuza Zero has a couple gameplay features or systems where you know um, I don't want to say that you know it was a lady of the night system, but it was akin to a Lady of the Night kind of thing, to where I guess women would fight, half undressed, and that was the premise around this fight club. So I was intrigued. Okay, speaking of which, there's also a side quest, um, gambit or whatever you want to call it, to where you can go into the naughty stores. I gotta watch what I say on YouTube, but you can go into the naughty stores and watch softcore P word, and they're based on girls. So from what it looked like, because there was a lot of empty slots, for every girl that you were able to watch in these P stores, there was a slot for different girls, and there was a lot of different slots. Okay, um, so that was fascinating. That's not something that you commonly see in games. So, I took advantage of that. More than a couple of times. I definitely didn't fill out all the slots because for me, when I play a story mode game, I like to push through and get through the story, find out what the story is about, and for me, the more into the story that I am, the less likely I am to do side missions. So even though I obviously didn't do all the side missions, the fact that the side missions was something that I was looking at, or was kind of in the forefront of my mind, re-highlights the fact that the Yakuza Zero story didn't really. Again, it wasn't like it was uninteresting, but it wasn't. I definitely didn't get to a point where I was like, "Oh man, what's gonna happen next? What's gonna happen next?" It was definitely one of those, you know, find the kidnapped person and get them back, basically. Now, obviously, there's a lot more details, but I'm only trying to go so far into spoilers. Which, now that I think about it, Yakuza Zero has been out for a long time now. If you haven't played it by this point, you're probably not going to. Um, so, with all that said, it was definitely a lot of interesting gameplay features. The side missions were unique. A lot of times, you knew a side mission was there or present, or that you were by one because you can overhear the NPCs, either ask you questions or you overhear the conversations. One thing that I don't really appreciate in most games, if not all, is when a NPC clearly has a side quest or a task that's optional, but the game forces you to talk to that NPC. That does happen now and again. I've started playing Yakuza, well, Kiwami. I mean, I found on Reddit that Kiwami is really the second Yakuza game, the second Yakuza, I guess Yakuza 2. Um, but anyway, that's the second game. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because it happens a lot more so far in that story, from what I'm finding out, that you get sucked into conversations, even if you don't necessarily care for them. Um, what else? Later in the story, well, not too far later, but not too, I would say a little ways before the middle of the story, there are more mechanics introduced to where, I guess, when you're um, controlling Makoto, there's a big bouncer, guy, big buff guy, bouncer type, and he just walks through the game, and I'm assuming his role is more so in a literal sense to add more or give the player more challenge, But by that point, I hadn't quite gotten my abilities to where I was like, okay, I know what I'm gonna use and I know what I'm gonna do. Um, with basically, like, I didn't have my preferred ability down yet. So I wasn't looking forward to taking him on. So it just kind of added to that whole avoiding conflict. If I'm doing a whole lot of huffing and puffing, avoiding conflict if I saw it coming, which for him that was all the time. I wasn't beating the gangs handily enough to feel confident that I wasn't gonna, lose to the big guy and have to restart at wherever my last checkpoint was. Which reminds me, um, for me, I didn't pick up super fast on how to save the game. Like my first two or three times playing the game, I just had my fingers crossed every time I would go to exit the game. Um, it took not a while, but it did take about my fourth or fifth time playing the game, booting in to realize, oh, okay, the phone booths, you go in there to save. Because I'm pretty sure it did mention it in the beginning parts of the game, the tutorial type parts, but I think I just missed it, or didn't read that far down in the blog, the dialogue blogs or whatever they're called. Um, I do like how efficient it is to make money in the game, stuff like that. That kind of determines how quickly or how well you will gain stuff that's needed, like businesses, or like I said, the attributes and skills and all that stuff. I did appreciate that. A lot of games will try to make money, will try to make making money in the game almost as hard as it is like in real life. I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm not into artificially making the game more difficult, you know by lessening your opportunities to do stuff, whatever that stuff is. um, as far as the story, like I mentioned, generally speaking, I wasn't the story didn't grab me. The story itself, in of itself, there was nothing necessarily wrong with it. It was just kind of run of the mill. um, So one thing I was hoping for throughout the story was that Kiru would meet Makoto at some point. I mean, the two key people in the series, from what I understand, going into it. But that never did happen. I mean, even when later on in the game, when Kiru is, really on a roll and, facing and beating up and solving things that he needs to face, beat up and solve, his friends will even mention, oh, Makoto was just here, oh, Makoto this or Makoto that, and vice versa. Same thing with Makoto. The people around him will mention Kiru. So, like, it implies, at least to me, the player, oh, okay, at some point they're probably going to meet. No, no. That would have been interesting, you know, that they're both fighting for the same person or looking out for the same person. Um, and it would have just been interesting to see how they link up and how they handle stuff, seeing how they're both members of the Yakuza, not different, I guess, clans of the. I think they're under the same head, the same family, but different clans within that family. It's a little complicated. Um, but going from beginning to end, so, like I'm not gonna try to get too specific, but basically Kiru, he's he's orphaned, and the guy that him and his best friend went through, he's in a lot of legal trouble. you know uh he falls out with his bosses or whatever, which leads me to another point that kind of got on my nerves after the first like two or three times. They have you fight Kuze or whoever, whatever his name is. I'm sure I'm pronouncing his name wrong. They have you fight that guy so damn much. It's crazy, man. Like after the second or third time, it's like, man, like you fight him in the street, you fight him in the story, you fight him when you go into buildings, you're just always fighting this dude, man. And it's like you would think in real life, once you beat a guy up like two or three times, he's gonna not like dodge you per se, but he's gonna avoid conflict with you. Not that Kuze guy. I mean, he gets beat up and he comes back for another. I mean, he'll try ganging up on you. Like that guy, that really got monotonous. I was over that faster than any. I'm trying to think. I think that mechanic of that story beat, like I was over the fastest out of anything. And there was a couple of story beats or mechanics that I was over. Like okay, I'm less of this, please. But man, they had you fight that guy a lot. You know, I mean, I was surprised when he wasn't the final boss of the game. That's what surprised me. I'm like, if you're gonna have me fight this guy like 15, 17, 12, however many times, you might as well make him the final boss. You know. So I wasn't fond of that. Um, the storyline with him and his best friend was fascinating. I mean, at first it made sense, besties and all that stuff. There was one part where Kiri was trying to look out for his best friend, and his best friend gets super emotional because he obviously doesn't want Kiri to get hurt by the Yakuza that he was a part of. And he decides that he's gonna kill or unalive Kiru, but then he doesn't, and then he starts crying, like bawling, crying extra hard, and then like it just stood out because it just came across as like a breakup. You know what I mean? Like when when a mommy and a daddy love each other very much. No, but for real, like when you're in a relationship, let's say a girl's breaking up with a guy, a guy's breaking up with a girl, and one or both get really emotional and crying and but oh, we can make this work, like that kind of thing. That's very much the vibe that I got from it. Like, and it wasn't obviously specifically, oh, we can make this work. It's like, oh, um, please don't do this, or please, I don't want to have to unalive you. Which I mean, that part makes sense. You don't want to unalive your best friend, but the way they went about it was just so over the top emotional, man. Just so over the top emotional. And then doing this literal 5 to 10 minute scene, which I mean, it felt way longer than that. What was kind of funny with all the dramatization going on and all the emotion going on, Kiru, he gets in the car and leaves the guy next to the woods. I mean, keep in mind they drove about half an hour to an hour, like out of town. Kiru falls asleep. They drive so far, so wherever they drive to, like I said, next to the woods, Kiru just like leaves the guy there after all this huge back and forth, emotional back and forth, and just drives to wherever, you know. But I would have to say, Yakuza Zero, like as a game, did I enjoy it? Like if I were to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say it was like a 7.3 because there was a lot of well, there was a decent amount of things that I did enjoy about the game. The combat, the the again, it wasn't really open world. Well, I guess it was open world, but I enjoyed that part. Even though the storyline didn't grip me, like it was more of like one of those things where it's like you learn stuff and it's more of like a that's interesting more than a, like, oh my goodness, what's gonna happen next. Um, it was cool to see Makoto, who's a mainstay in the Yakuza series, how he gets introduced and what his backstory is to a degree. It's interesting to see how their organization works. Now I don't know how close this is to reality of the Yakuza in Japan or whatever, but it's still interesting to see or learn about. Um, like I said, I like how they make money. I like the variability, the the variability. I think I'm saying that right of the side missions. And the side missions they don't really pull. Now again, I didn't play all the side missions. There was one, like some of them pissed me off. Like there's a kid who lost a video game that he wanted to buy, and like I swear you had to go through like not just go through but like find them. That like there wasn't like a point on the map to where you could follow. You had to literally find these rando NPCs that stole this kid's game. One guy steals it from the kid directly, and then another guy steals it, and then like it's just like 5 or 6 layers of dudes that steal this game, and like you gotta find one guy after another. Again, no marker on the map to where these guys are. The only reason why I finished it is because throughout the story, I would just randomly happen to run into a guy that stole it from the last guy. I was over that not too long after. I was over the constantly fighting Kuze or Kuz or whatever his name is. So I didn't. I wasn't feeling that. But back to my scoring. So I could appreciate that how the differences between the side missions, not that side mission, but you know, um, the ladies of the night, and how you can interact with it. Um, Other side missions to where like if you keep going into the convenience stores to talk to the cashier, you can get to know them. I guess it's like how in Persona 5 they have the confidant system. So like that's what it reminded me of, was a confidant system. So yeah, like I said, I give it not a 7.5, not that much, but a little bit higher than a 7. Like I said, I think I said a 7.3. But but yeah, if you like that RPG esque, I wouldn't say it's a true RPG. Like it's an RPG in the sense that like it has skill trees, I guess. But I wouldn't call it a true RPG. But if you like that style of game, check it out. Um, I just wish the story gripped me a lot more than it did. I wish it interested me. I wish I was more interested in it than what I ended up being. But anyway, with that said, I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.